Welcome everyone. Today is the 23rd of March, 2023. This is the Prometheus Dev Summit. We do follow the CNCF Code of Conduct. Please follow it. As per usual, please help me write the thing. So A, write yourselves into the attendees, and B, please help writing the thing. Also, we just came in from the all hands from my side, so we prepare what we're doing first. Bartek 788, Josh, Brian. Do we have Josh? No, that we can. Support for secret provisions in Prometheus Alert Manager. Bartek, do you want to get started on this? You're muted.
Which one again? Sorry.
Bartek, support for secret providers in Prometheus Alert Manager.
Yeah, so this was this is the issue mentioned by AWS, who wanted to kind of integrate essentially the secret manager. I think was it like alert manager? Sorry, the AWS kind of secret manager into alert manager configuration, right? So instead of storing, in the file a password to Slack or any other receiver, for example, we would like to have, integration that would fetch from Vault, maybe from, something that AWS provides or any other secret provider. And, I think there was a back and forth discussion, but ideally we want to decide on the Prometheus level as well, because Alert Manager is using essentially Prometheus way of dealing with secrets. So do we want to add that into our configuration of Prometheus first, or globally, right? So this is the question around that. Do we want to provide the providers, let's say within similar guarantees as service discovery mechanisms? And I think it makes sense that the lady who asked for that, she was passionate to kind of work on it, maybe maintain it. So yeah, that's the discussion.
So at Grafana Labs, we want to do not particularly on the alerts, but on it basically turns out we reuse the TLS library, which is in Exporter Toolkit for all of our TLS config. So anytime we want to read secrets, certificates or whatever, it's kind of going back to that code. But I think it's essentially the same discussion.
Well, the toolkit is more on the coding side, right? It's kind of like extending the configuration structure, and we are talking about something, extended to that, literally allowing user to specify and hosting our own native provider integrations, right? So partially this is related, and I think I don't see any stronger projections. It's technical implementation, Brian, for your PR, so I would approve it. But but maybe Julian has more context.
Yeah, so this is just that we need to know a bit more about the implementation, because for some secrets like a file, we would read it every time, but if you talk to AWS, maybe we need to do some caching, or we want to only query it once. So I think a small design document, at least to answer those questions about caching, would be valuable. And also, do we want a solution like the discovery, when you can in code just register your secret provider? And then, or do we want a more static thing where you have a defined structure for all the projects to use? So that's the kind of questions that I'm wondering now. But I am open to have this, and I think at the end we could even replace the existing file secrets and the existing static secrets with such a provider.
Great. Yeah. So I would say we need design doc, and we have, I'm just noting, the clear few requirements we need to answer. Yeah.
I don't like one of the things that happens with the current service discovery, which is we end up linking every cloud SDK. I'm not sure I have a solution to that. Given this is where there are two different sets of requirements. There's people who want to run one thing, Prometheus, and they want to connect it up to AWS or Ali Cloud or whatever. And then people who want to use the library, who could more reasonably be expected to just provide an interface that did it.
Yes, but if you use Prometheus as a library, you are not linking to all the cloud providers. You are only linking to that if you do an import of the specific service discovery.
Yeah, this is pretty powerful. Yeah, I was recently
since 2021, we are doing blank imports of the discoveries from the cloud providers, and you can build a Prometheus server with only Kubernetes discovery or with only with the service discovery that you actually need, and then we don't build everything in. And I think that's something we should envision for the secret provider as well. It also enables people to just, if they want to rebuild Prometheus, to just change the plugin.go file, which we have an helper to help, and they can even have their proprietary service discovery directly in the Prometheus. And they don't need to change the config package, they don't need to change any package.
Okay, well, I'm going to have to re-look at why Mimir is linking the entire universe.
I mean, in Go modules, it's still downloading everything because they are not separate modules, right, Julian?
Yes, because we are testing all the built-in service discovery. So if you run the Prometheus test, you probably link to them.
Anyway, we can iterate over that, but that's definitely, yeah, ideally we have the same thing because, I mean, I don't see, I mean, yeah, there might be a lot of ideas people would like to have us maintain. Okay, but the idea to have a design doc and do the global thing the same between Alert Manager and Prometheus seems like a consensus, yeah. Okay, any other comment, any other feedback? Okay, should we have consensus?
Do you want to write it?
Sure.
I'm kind of tired.
Yeah, no worries. So let's, we are open for this idea. We need a design doc. I don't know if we want to be very clear about exact answers we want. We can kind of like mention that on the issue. What do you think? Okay, we are open to this idea. Well, this, yes. What's this? To the idea of having secret providers in.
Who do we think is writing the design doc?
Well, first of all, I will come back to the issue, and they will. I mean, we can essentially mention that they can make it faster by proposing something from their side. Yeah, so community driven. We're open to the idea of having secret provider support in Prometheus and Alert Manager. I would say similar to service discovery. We need the design doc first. Okay. We're open to the idea of having secret provider support in Prometheus and Alert Manager. Similar to service discovery, we need a design document first. Anyone against? Okay, thank you.
Perfect. Next, we have Brian with future of labels. Labels.
Yeah, so I guess this is 90% for awareness, and then because me and Bartek and Julian started talking about it in Slack, and thought it might be easier voice wise. So the background is in a typical Prometheus, 30% of the memory goes in labels. This labels data structure, and it's pretty easy to see that it's inefficient and invent things in your head to make it more efficient. So I've implemented one of those things that entered my head. We have got to the point, thanks Julian, where we have an image published. So Prometheus 2.43 is built with and without this different data structure. And some people have been reporting their results. I think some people have said it's 20% less memory or something like that. That's probably the most favorable end. One person said, yeah, not much different. Anyway, the thing is that there's a lot of code in projects downstream from Prometheus that assumes that this thing is a slice. Well, there was a lot of code in Prometheus, and I sat there for a couple of weeks changing it all. So I think that's one thing which is not really the topic of this meeting, but the downstream folks are definitely affected if we just go ahead and make this change. So Julian had teed up this timeline where 2.43 we would have with and without published. And then if that all went reasonably well, 2.44 would just flip to the new data structure. So that's kind of the plan on the table. What does anyone else think?
I've got it running in a test cluster with the new version, and it looks great so far.
How does it compare?
It was something like 20% less memory.
Not bad, not bad.
Typical Kubernetes cluster container metrics, about 700,000. There's my... it reduced, actually, the interesting bit here, I can even... normalized by head series, it looks pretty good.
Nice, good job. Yeah, so I think we discussed the user, this kind of feature, experimental feature toggling, right? That was not possible or like not very trivial to make in code. So I think this exceptional release, I think we had like blog posts and whatever, I think makes sense as long as we don't have this issue often. So I think I agree with that. Let's ideally kind of like communicate and do in 22.44, sorry. You know, the one release. But however, I have like this you know, suggestion on the code level. Like there are lots of work on downstream, and what about leaving labels slice and adding another structure, and then changing TSDB, like keeping the change of TSDB and Prometheus to use the new one, like you did already. Just that already limits a lot and allows kind of some optionality for downstream users. And of course, if they interact with TSDB, they have to convert to the new structure, but that's much smaller, you know, much smaller surface than changing Mimir or Thanos or anything else that uses this label slice everywhere for even when not interacting directly with Prometheus APIs.
Well, my expectation is that if you use the Prometheus downstream, you will not use the package label, only the label from Prometheus. You will use the TSDB, you will do the relabeling, so you will not only use the labels by themselves. Labels are not something that you would use. So I think that even if we would keep the existing labels and we switch Prometheus to another version, downstream will anyway needs to use the new one because they would call function from Prometheus itself.
Yeah, it's an interesting idea. I guess I came at it with the perspective these labels are everywhere and we want to shrink them everywhere. I guess so. There, I think there is an interesting discussion we could have about the code. And again, I'm sensitive this is not the meeting for that. So maybe me and Bartek and anyone else who's interested should arrange to do that. There's, I mean, to make it short, there's a few data structures in there, and I'm sort of, as time goes on, changing my view on which ones are good for which things. So maybe, yeah, I don't think this is the right meeting to get into the details of the code and the bits and the bytes.
You're right, but in some way, I think our discussion went in the direction that we make certain decisions on top of releases for downstream projects. And this is the topic for this discussion, right? Because we are impacting Prometheus users because of Mimir and Thanos and any downstream, right? I think with certain backward compatibility approach, like my suggestion, we can just don't, kind of like have this kind of sorted, like less painful for Mimir, for Thanos. So they don't need to import two different code bases, adding strict label tags and whatever. And only focus on what's the best for users, how to maybe introduce this experimental feature, right?
It would get, I think, a little bit more ugly. Basically, we have to have two names. One thing is currently called labels.labels. So
I know. It's like
the easy
sweet
thing
name that is already used. Yeah.
Yeah, the easy thing for downstream is to have that one still be a slice and to have another one called like labels better or labels
exactly.
plus or
yeah. So why not adding labels v2
labels 2? Yeah,
or just labels, name package labels, but put it in like labels v2 directory or something. Yeah.
It could be a different package. That's an interesting idea. I think trying to be backwards compatible, which is kind of not historically the spirit of Prometheus, but maybe things have changed.
Okay, so I can share one thing is that I learned that some version is important when I joined Google. I spent like a month doing one thing, just having internal version of Prometheus to work in monorepo. So I really care about Semver now. And I was like Leola before. So yeah, I would love Semver, yeah.
Go on.
We are doing Semver. It is version 0 dot something, so...
Yeah, so we don't, yeah. Yeah, anyway, on best effort, right? But especially I think it would help Thanos and Mimir more than Google here. But yeah, still would be nice to maybe introduce more of compatibility guarantees for APIs. Yeah.
Yeah, I have. I mean, I've done all the work on Mimir, but Loki, excitingly, has the same problem. So I still. Oh, Julian's typing things in chat. Yeah, I think the point is that we're talking about having two labels implementations in Prometheus that both work, and that's obviously doable, but doesn't one. Now that I've done all the work to convert Prometheus, it doesn't benefit Prometheus; it just benefits everyone else. It maybe makes Prometheus a little bit more confusing. Oh, and if anyone's wondering whether we can do this with an interface, we believe that is puts too much of an overhead. The dynamic dispatch is too much of an overhead for this very low level struct. Generics don't help either.
Yeah, I agree. Well, I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not. I mean, I think. Yeah, I think it would make even your life better with Loki for sure. But yeah, I don't know. I would love to add this compatibility and add another package, for example, just for the sake of simplicity and deprecating kind of labels. I'm not sure if we need consensus here, honestly. Like, yeah, it's kind of like we don't guarantee, we don't break users, so I don't think we need to decide anything on the summit, but it was good to have this, yeah, overview. And I was surprised with this kind of 2 releases in 1 release, but I think it all makes sense.
You think we don't need it, or you're actively against it?
I was surprised. No. I think we
I
need
mean,
it.
on the consensus.
Oh, yeah, we could have consensus on the release split, right? I think as an exception, it makes sense, given the circumstances. So we could have consensus on that if we want.
I'm fine either way. I just needed to bring in some clothing because it started to rain. So if someone else did the,
Sure.
But
I can
Do
do
you
it for the
think-
next one. I'm sorry.
do you think, Bartek, that we could switch the default tag and by default build a string, and the downstream project that have not updated need to explicitly set the tag, but we don't break them long term, but we still encourage them to move? Because overall, I think everyone should benefit from this change, and we should make it anyway the default, and not moving again all the Prometheus code in another direction. And as I said, it does not fix the way that anyway they will probably use other part of the Prometheus code, like the relabeling, so they will need to convert to the new data structure anyway. Or we could introduce a compat library in Prometheus, but the default would be the new one, but we can have a compat and what you call dot labels, then it would render the new data structure. So downstream project they could switch the import to use the compat.
Yeah, you're right. Like they could just copy the labels and just run a set to have an import path of the labels, and then if they think this is optimization for them. So I could agree there are mitigations, and perhaps we could just mention somewhere the steps was the easiest to migrate to that after Brian's experience of doing it for Mimir. So maybe you're right. Maybe especially the work was done already. Something like this is essentially doable on their on client side, on user side, not necessarily for us. So yeah, I would be happy with that, sure. All right, so some consensus. Yeah, for example, what we do with 244, we agree to have string label separate release for 2.43 and 1 release with string labels by default not by default, it's not option even, with string labels from 244. I think, yeah, we could have consensus. I think we are okay. I don't know if we have consensus on this. I mean, we have consensus here, but I know if, like, from technical perspective, we have to like mention that we are happy to kind of keep the labels and break downstream users. So anyway, let's focus on this consensus first. Consensus. We agree to have string labels separate release for 243 and 1 release with string labels from 244. Any objections? Okay. Yeah, and then let's leave this technical discussion for later. But yeah, Brian, I would say let's follow. Yeah, I'll be curious to talk with Thanos team as well, but I think it should be fine. My suggestion can be again applied to the user side of things. Right. So thanks. What's next topic, Richie?
It's
Hysteresis.
hysteresis again for Björn. I can also, but
Yeah, so gosh, this is so long that I wrote this down. So there's an issue linked. Essentially, I mean, we have keep firing for that's already in, right? And it probably solves many problems. And then I had this idea of allowing multiple expressions that all have to stop firing for an alert to stop firing. And I like it because it's a very small change in the configuration surface. Naive users won't even notice that it's there, and power users can still use it. And then we had a bit of discussion on the issue, and there was a pictometric style proposal with explicit thresholds in YAML, which I emphatically don't like. And I thought we should not just leave it in the issue and maybe have a little discussion here. And the conclusion might very well be keep firing for is enough, and we don't need anything. I'm a bit off. Like I academically like the thing with the multiple expressions, but I'm too far away from use cases personally to really confidently say this is what the world needs.
What is your proposal if we have three expressions that all you alert when the first one is firing, and then it keeps firing until all the other ones are not firing anymore, or they need to be firing sequentially?
Sorry, can you say that again? Now you're muted.
You're muted.
Okay, if you have three expressions, the first one is firing, and you would need for the three to stop firing to stop the alert together, right? So the first one would be special.
No, I don't think so. I think the alert starts to fire when all of them fire, and it stops to fire when all of them do not fire.
But then you can do that with end.
Can you?
Can you?
Then we.
So the use case is you have a temperature above 20 and you want to stop firing when it's below 15,
18.
right?
No, I think you cannot do it with and because the logic inverts, right? So for firing, you need all of it to fire, and for stopping firing, you need all of them to not fire. That's why you can't put it into pure PromQL. Like essentially, the example in the longish comment in the issue is essentially my temperature metric greater 80, my temperature metric greater 75. If you just add this, it would just be an alert that fires when it's above 80 and stops firing when it's below 80. But with the proposal that the alert fires when all of them fire, it fires once it's above 80, and it stops firing when all of them stop firing, then it stops firing when it's below 75, like classical hysteresis. And it's completely symmetric. You can add any number of conditions there because we had this in the very initial discussion at the Dev Summit that there might be cases where you need many thresholds. I think this just works fine, right? The question is if it's needed. And also there are other things if you want to have like 4 clauses on each of these conditions or not. These are kind of details that could be nailed down in a design doc or even during implementation. Yeah, I mean, essentially I put it here because I don't just want to, like, it's not just me saying that I dislike the approach with explicit trigger and resolve thresholds, like in the proposal that we have there. I really dislike it, but I mean, I don't think it's for me alone to decide, and that's one reason why it's here. So ideally, we would come collectively to an conclusion. Which of the there are essentially three fundamental proposals on the table. The one is be happy with keep firing for. The second is allow multiple conditions in the way I proposed, and the third one is create a new, on the config level, create like a new entry threshold, trigger resolve with textual new, I call it YAL, yet another expression language, implemented in some strings or whatever.
Okay, I like the multiple expressions, and I think we should move ahead to that. But I would keep for the global alert and not for each individual expression.
There's a typo, a comment.
As a data point, I've never seen a customer request anything like this. I'm not sure if it matters, but at least from my side, what typically comes up is hysteresis, right? And usually the simple case of you can query the alert series in order to be able to do that, solves their problems. The problem that I see with multiple expressions is that how do you handle then the value template, the value variable in the templated language, right? You would probably need to now have values from each alert if the queries are different. Do you run the alerts sequentially, so one after the other, or do you run them in parallel? That can potentially, If anything, I do like the first option of being explicit with this is a trigger, this is resolved, because at least it's less confusing than just a list of expressions that you don't really understand how they work until you try them out or read the documentation. My 2 cents, I think, for now.
Well, all the alerts and all the rules in a group are always run at the same timestamp, so running them in parallel sequentially is not something that will change anything because they are all run at the same exact timestamp.
It changes the total runtime of the group. So if you have a group that runs over 1 minute, and you now have 2 queries that each take 30 seconds, it will change the whole runtime of the group and effectively affect your group. In one case,
yes.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Yes, it will take longer maybe, but it will still be queried at the same time.
No, yeah, I'm not talking about whenever we query them at the same time or not. Yeah, I understand that that's the way that it works right now. But I'm talking about the execution of the alerts themselves, which basically means the alert takes as long as the query has the slowest query takes if we run them in parallel as opposed to serial. But then, right, if you run them, well, no, this is technically not the case because this could be alerts. Okay, yeah, fair enough. Yeah, whenever we run them, and I was thinking about the case where you want to have the second expression depend on the first expression, but you shouldn't, right? Because it's not technically a recording rule of any sense. So I guess it doesn't matter except the total runtime of the whole group.
Yeah, and I mean the values, the templating about the value is a good point, right? The old value would then maybe just return the first, and then you kind of have a values thing if you want multiple. I guess in 99% of the cases, the value would actually be the same because that's what you usually need this for, right? Just different thresholds. But you're not limited to this use case, right? Well, the explicit config level proposal is essentially you have this one use case, and we are now creating an expression language for that in YAML just for it. But anyway, Richie wanted to say something.
It's not just 1 sec. Sorry. Go ahead, Richie. Yeah.
No, it's fine. Finish.
One more thing is not just the value on the templates, it's also the API. So the rules API now emits a value label, a value field, I believe. We would have to change the API as well.
Yeah, or we just leave it to the first value for compatibility and then have this additionally. But yeah, it's a good point. It complicates the whole On the API level, you have to do more stuff. It's a bit over surface.
So the first point is probably almost moot, but on the customers have not requested this. I honestly believe that IT is behind other parts of the industry in quite a few areas, and hysteresis is one of them, and control theory in general is one of them. I do believe that once we have this, people will start using it, and we might see similar things to SLOs and such, where people only realize what this actually enables after they have been shown the faster horse. From the detached from, I like the idea of having groups of things which must be firing, and then when they really stop, this thing stops firing, blah, 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 blah. But on the other hand, there is a well-defined behavior for hysteresis, and that is you have a start condition or more start conditions, and you have one or more stop conditions. And I think that from the syntax, it would make more sense to keep as close to the official definition of hysteresis, which is in other industry areas, rather than inventing something new.
I'm not a control theoretician, whatever the word is, but I would spontaneously claim that the proposal here is essentially, I mean, the stop condition is just an inverted start condition, right? I think it's should be mathematically the same, just that it's
they are functionally equivalent, or you can write functionally equivalent queries in all cases. Like you might have details about one is larger and the other is then below equal, and things like these, which is the usual to flip certain queries. But beyond this, it's functionally the same. It's more about syntax.
So I also want to point out that some customers have already asked us to do that, and we ended up doing that kind of things. When you look at the actual alerts, time series to do the hysteresis, and I think that's the kind of thing that we actually should replace with proper hysteresis in Prometheus. So you can do it now in Prometheus, but it's very complicated, and no one really wants to do it like that.
Yeah, but I don't think that solves that complication. That's what I was saying before, right? Like querying the alert series is technically one solution. But you also need to think about how do you query the alert series with multiple expressions as well. Right? It's like if you have 3 expressions, right? Does that mean that you're going to have an alert series after the first one, or only when all of them finish writing? And how are you going to translate that? How are you going to go and translate that into the alert series as well? It's like, I'm not saying just to be clear, I'm being that person that's just pointing out problems, because I want to make sure that if we choose to implement this, right, we understand all the implications of it. Not because it's not a no. I'm not saying no, let's not do this. I'm just like pointing out all the different things that this implicates, and the fact that I have seen no evidence of the community wanting this. Community, I mean customers and people that I talk to. So, yeah, it's a question of, is it the right time? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Just posting the argument.
I personally believe it's beyond time. It's past time.
Fair.
And I honestly strongly believe it, because it's something which is well established in any other automated monitoring of whatever system you have. In particular, where it's really important that people don't die or get maimed or something. This is super common.
So, for example, Grafana Alerting does this. Grafana Alerting allows you to have X amount of expressions in there, right? And we even solved the whole values thing. So we have like values dot the name of the expression, which you can name, right, by using a hash map instead of an array, and then refer to them as the values labels directly there. But like we built it, and I've never seen it out in the wild. Maybe people are using it; they haven't had any trouble with it. But yeah,
It might be a little bit of a tangent. I also would position that people who are using Grafana alerting are not as advanced as people who are
I agree with that assessment.
alerting.
100%, which is like, I think that's to my argument, right? Which is like, Prometheus users are definitely more advanced than Grafana alerting users at all aspects, right? And this is something that we've had in Grafana for a while and not requesting it, or from the Prometheus side, not requesting it to handle both. But if you say it's the right time, who am I to judge?
Well, I guess, like I did in 2019, people are maybe just doing their own stuff to do hysteresis, which is not really nice.
Agreed. Querying the alert series is typically cumbersome. Yeah.
I mean, in a way, there is a fourth proposal on the table doing it in yet another way than any of the 3 proposals on the table, right? I was hoping that we could narrow down the proposal space and not widen it here, but yeah.
Francis?
So from the 2 proposals, I like the expressions ones the most because it would cleanly connect to what feels for me the most correct one. But like you're mentioned, there is another way which I think would circumvent creating another new language and clearly having the start and end conditions from control theory defined in there, and that's replacing what they did with greater than or having thresholds and just having the expressions in there. But then if you see that as a solution, I do think we were more to the expressions side than what we had before. But I do think that also if then on the use cases, when talking about when working with sensors, and we might see this more in the future with if you have Home Assistant or something, you will have this already. A lot of sensors need this control theory, and I think that's where the use case for Prometheus might not be that as public, because if people are using sensors with Prometheus, they might not be that public or IT oriented, and they just use something to connect with it, or they use their own solutions.
Well, I personally would like that we just put off the table the idea that we use thresholds defined directly in the alert themselves, because Prometheus expressions are always more richer than just comparing with alerts, right? It would reduce a lot the power of PromQL to enforce some values in thresholds.
Yeah, I agree. But does anybody disagree? Like we had a bit somebody, Josh, was it you who said you would like the explicitness of this, let's call it YAML, expressing stuff on the YAML level?
Yes. But like, there's 2 things in there, right? So we're talking about the first example where you say thresholds trigger resolve greater than 80, less than 75. I don't necessarily love the fact that we have another abstract query language in there with the GT and LTs. I think that should just be expressions, but I do love the fact that you have trigger and resolve, which is makes it just like very, very clear what is what. And then you can reference those directly in template variables, which is usually the biggest pain. I get it. Everything I do now when it comes to alerting rules, right? It's thinking about how does this translate to templating the rule itself. Because like that's one of the biggest pain points that I receive all the time and that I see all the time. It's like, once you have this perfect alert query, it's like, how do I make it into actionable and useful information? So my mind usually starts going around that part of the problem. And that's something that proposal particularly solves. It's very clear what the trigger is. It's very clear what the resolve is. You can reference them directly in templates, etc., etc., etc. But I do understand that the other one is a little bit more powerful, right? Because you can have as many expressions as you want.
Yeah, and it's not just about a threshold, right? I mean, Prometheus alerts are more than just thresholds. I mean, it's rare in practice, but it's whatever. It could be whatever, and this would kind of narrow it down to it has to be a threshold, has to be about a number is above or below another value.
But then the
Yes,
question. Go ahead.
and Bjorn, another thing is that there are many metrics with dynamic thresholds. So the threshold is not defined. It is based on historical data or another metric or the number of pods in a cluster. So the threshold itself in a lot of alerts is just dynamic and not something you can express in an integer or a float.
Yeah, I mean, weird stuff could happen, right? It needs to be divisible by 8 to resolve. How do you express that then? So what's the conclusion then?
I'm not convinced we have a strong conclusion, do we?
I don't know. I mean, if we can conclude that we definitely don't want to implement a new expression language in some text form with like new GT, LT, GELE operators. I mean, that would be at least some point. I guess you could come up with some trigger and resolve setup and somehow put PromQL in there, I guess. If somebody had a proposal like that, we could also better discuss how much it is indeed then more intuitive than this generalized proposal I had.
I mean, we can easily try for a consensus. I don't think anyone will disagree on us not introducing something which is less powerful than PromQL and additional stuff to learn and maintain and design. So let's flip this into a positive. Let me think.
Stupid question. Who is the decision for? Is it for the person that originally reported this issue, or is it the person that? Because I'm wondering. Let's say that we agree here that we want to do this. It's like, what's the next step? Writing a design document or something, or starting doing the work.
We don't have the next step yet. We're doing the piece by piece, inching towards something. Maybe a layer cake of consensus. I don't know where we'll end up yet.
Okay. So if that's the case, then and you all agree that we should do this, and I don't see why not, right? As long as we put care into the different pieces, I think overall is a net positive. That's my opinion.
What is an overall net positive? I didn't parse.
The fact that you can add multiple expressions within a row, which is what we're kind of discussing, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's try the first, and then we can do that run right after. Consensus: whatever hysteresis mechanism is chosen, it will be based on PromQL. All agreed? Anyone disagreeing? Good. So let's put this down. Consensus: we want to allow more than one expression for triggering and for stopping any alert. Maybe more than one PromQL expression. Consensus: we want to allow more than one PromQL expression for triggering and for stopping any alert. All agreed? Anyone disagreeing? People don't seem happy or confused? Or 50% of people don't seem happy, 50% seem happy? Raise your voice.
The question if that implies it has to be a positive resolve condition, or you could reverse it. I mean, I understand.
I'm not getting there yet. On purpose.
Understand this statement as in this doesn't explicitly ask for a resolve condition. It could be an inverted. This all has to be not trigger, not firing to resolve the alert. That's still covered by this, right?
On purpose.
Yeah,
Layer
I'm
cake.
just saying for clarity because people look confused.
Okay, so anyone disagreeing? Okay. We can try for the last consensus or it might be the last consensus.
I mean, from taking it from there, I could imagine that if we have a concrete suggestion on the table how you can do this with PromQL, maybe with resolve and what was the other thing, trigger, and then we have concrete stuff we can compare. Maybe that's a call we can make then. But it's already much better than, I mean, essentially we ruled out that we don't want to do anything, which was also a valid proposal, and we have ruled out to create another expression language to solve this. And from there on, I think somebody has to come up with a concrete proposal, which we can then comment on and compare it to other proposals. I don't necessarily think we should make a call right now.
What if, and I had to, as you probably saw if you saw my video, I had to refocus once or twice during the discussion, so maybe this was covered, but what if we allow A, a triggering condition, B, a condition which positively stops the alert, and C, something which needs to keep firing to maintain the alert? So basically allow both ways to, but that might be confusing, or only one of the two.
Yeah, I mean, if that's necessary, sure. But if in the end we always come down to the start condition must also be, what's the word? Like the start condition must also be false now to stop the thing. Then I think it's all equivalent mathematically. If we have something that needs to trigger when it starts, but then it doesn't matter anymore, I'm not sure if that's still hysteresis, but it's that would be quite complicated, I think, to implement, but it might be a necessity. Not sure. That's stuff to explore, right?
But isn't this the different, like, if let's go back to the temperature. I say trigger when it's above 20. And I say stop triggering when it's below 18. So
then
when
you have cunningly formulated your conditions so that the one is a subcondition of the other. But we could also say start to trigger when humidity is 80%, but stop triggering when temperature is 18 degrees. Do we still then rely on the humidity to be above 80%, or does it not matter anymore when the temperature has dropped enough? That's not like a hysteresis in the classical sense on one value, but that could be formulated with alerting conditions, right?
But let's start with the simple one, because if we trigger above 20 degrees Celsius and we can only stop below 18 degrees Celsius to avoid flip-flopping the alert, then if we sit at 19 degrees Celsius for, as of right now, an indefinite amount of time, that alert will still keep firing.
Which is the point, right?
So we need to maintain the firing state, even though the initial trigger condition has gone away.
Yeah. But that's the idea, right? Of this is why we can't express it in a single PromQL expression. or only very weirdly with referring to the alert state, because the condition is first, all the conditions are true, and to stop, all the conditions must be false. The question is if that's enough to model everything, in which case I would still think it's the most elegant way to just model it that way, and not have this trigger and resolve, although it's all the same under the hood, it's just inverted. Yeah, I mean, mathematicians would see the easier model as the more intuitive one, while non-mathematicians might want the explicit keywords there, even if it's making things more complicated, in fact. But as said, right, I think we can, if we have a concrete suggestion how to implement the explicit version with PromQL, then we can compare it directly head-to-head. At the moment, it's a bit up in the air because we don't know how it would look with PromQL expressions.
Wait a second. Let me see. Maybe I'm misunderstanding here.
Sorry. Before that, one question. When you say PromQL expressions, do you mean that we should be required to encode any complex queries? Like, let's say we have three different queries which can whichever we play this, but would you say that we have all of those three queries within one PromQL expression, or would we be able to tie them together with Booleans in the YAML, in the config, or anything? Because I think the second would be substantially easier to reason about if we just allow and, or, and not, and maybe X or.
I don't think we need that at all. I mean, right now, if I'm happy to be proven otherwise, but I think the only logic for the hysteresis is all of these conditions have to be true for the alert to start firing. All of these conditions have to be false for the alert to stop firing. And that's hysteresis, as far as I understand it.
Yes. I think that Björn's proposal really makes a lot of sense, and that's what I would personally go for, just a list of expressions. The start condition is defined as they are all firing, and the stop conditions is defined as they are all not firing.
Just a list of expressions with subconditions, or just a list of expressions, period?
Just a list of conditions, because even if you have subconditions, if the first condition is still firing, you won't get up to keep firing anyway.
Certain parts, can you repeat or rephrase?
Yeah, I think that what John tried to express is that even if you have multiple conditions, if you have the first one that fires but not the other ones, you still have your alert to continue firing.
Yes, yes.
I'm confused.
I have some. Okay, I haven't looked in detail at all at this proposal, so maybe I'm missing something. If you have multiple expressions, like usually alerting rules would be formulated in such a way that they are general. So one alert might fire for one host, and another one might fire for another. And how does this work in this case where you have two expressions, which hopefully you could also keep general, but the first one fires for one host, the other one fires for different hosts, and now they both produce an output. Is there some kind of label matching that has to happen, or is that not supported at all?
Yes,
of course.
How does that work? I haven't.
The alert, I mean, the triggering condition is all of them fire. Of course, that's for per alert. An alert is defined by a label match.
Okay. Yeah,
Which
that
is
was
like
what I was wondering about the entire time. So the same label set needs to be output by multiple
every
expressions for this
and if
alert. Okay.
If the two expressions, they both produce two label sets, and one of them is matching, then this is one alert in the end, right? And the other,
yep.
But usually, like in those simple examples with a temperature comparison, sure, that naturally works, but you could do crazy stuff, right, with that, which is it's a feature. It's not a bug in this case.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. And then does the So yeah. Okay. Good. That
I
clarifies.
think it's very elegant. The only what Josh said is a really good point. The kind of breakage here is that now you have potentially multiple values. In the simple example, the value is the same. So we have to put some thinking in it. What will be dollar value? What will it resolve to? Should we have all of the values somewhere in the API and the template expansion? But like in the has to be thought through, of course. But I would also say just take the first expression as the one dictating the value, because in most cases the value will be the same anyway. But yeah.
Well, it's not an issue to add another field like expressions, and the expression original can be one of the list, but you can also have the list, and if you have the list, you can have values, which is another variable, and value refers to the expression in expression. So we can do that without breaking. You are muted.
It's not as simple as I was hoping for, but you're right? There are ways around it. It's just needs more thinking, of course. But Fabian has raised his hand.
Yeah, thank you. Just a quick question, because I think to implement this, you would need to store the state, like which alert is firing and which not, right? Because when it's currently firing, the stop condition is evaluated, and when it's not firing, the start condition. So I'm wondering if that state would be just the regular time series database somewhere, or if it's kind of a separate storage thing.
We are already storing the state in memory for the for condition.
So that means if you restart Prometheus, then the hysteresis kind of reset and the alerts stop even if the stop condition isn't reached.
I mean, we could, like for the for condition, that could be checkpointed, right? But otherwise, yes. If you start from without state, that's hysteresis is state, right? If you start without state, it implies that the alert would not fire anymore, even if it would have without losing state.
But the issue is not specific to the to that because also when you restart Prometheus, the alerts are not restored directly from the state neither. We don't store the annotation. We only store the for condition if it lasts for more than 1 hour. I think. Yeah.
There is a difference, though. If it's an alerting condition, it will immediately, or whenever the for condition is met, restart firing, whereas you might be in the window where it should not be switched off. Brian?
I was going to say to Fabian's question, the state is persisted in a series, which is called alerts for state. Oh, Josh has also posted that in the chat.
Thank you.
I did some reading on the side to reconfirm that what I thought was right. So at least in engineering, the way hysteresis is usually implemented is you have switch on conditions and switch off conditions, which tells us which way, in my opinion, we should be defaulting. And then there's only the question left of, do we want to enable the user to choose which takes precedent? Like if both my switch on condition and my switch off condition are both true, should I be switching off or should I be maintaining the on state? And that might need to be a configuration option in the thing.
It sounds very limiting.
Very what?
It sounds very limiting to have such an approach regarding to just having a list of expressions.
What use cases can you not cover with this?
Well, first, it sounds like you are still limited then to 2 expressions.
No, we have consensus that we allow more than one expression. And in my head, at least, I think we should be allowing people to chain different prompt queries with and or to make it a little bit easier and not have humongous prompt queries. Francis?
So switching I'm gonna make it so using the multiple expressions without having explicit statements of triggering and resolve does not really like exclude having on and off conditions like you mentioned from the engineering theory in hysteresis. It's you might describe them differently, but they still exist and they still can be used. The only thing that what you did mention that I'm not sure how to do in the expressions is how to give the priority to something. If both states can be true in the multiple expressions in a single list, I'm not sure how you would give priority to certain statements for triggering and going into the firing state. Aside from that, what Fabian mentioned, having like coming back from those states and having a data point in between your hysteresis zone, and like that's also like an issue you generally have. Like if you have no knowledge from the state before and you end up in the middle, you just have to assume that you're somewhere. You can't say you're not in hysteresis at that point because hysteresis has to switch between the values. Like if you just show up in a data point, you can't say, oh yeah, we're in between the two zones, so we are in so are we or are we not in hysteresis? It's not a question. You are not because you don't know the state before.
On your first point, I think there's 4 different options of the stop condition being true, and then the start condition being true, and the start condition being true, and the stop condition being true. So that's the one axis, and the other one is which is stronger. And those 4 options can be put into a config statement. But a point of order, because we are at 10 past the full hour, and I've been reliably told that humans need bio breaks. Should we take a 5-minute break or 10 minutes, or should we continue discussing? I see a single person nodding, so let's do 5 minutes. Okay, see you in 5. Everyone will start frantically reading on Wikipedia now.
Are you gonna stay here? Or are you gonna take the break, Richie?
I'm probably just going to stand up and stretch my legs, but
Okay, cool.
Break is up. Do 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 do. Please come back. Do 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 do. Please come back. Do 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 do. Let's discuss. I can't sing. Do 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 do. Go ahead and sing with me, Josh.
This is my new ringtone.
Sorry, what?
This is my new tone on my phone now.
I probably got this stuck into the brain of half of you for the rest of the day. You're very much welcome. So let's keep talking so others hear there's noise coming from their computers. Okay. Let's wait at least for Björn and Fabian, because they were actively engaged in the discussion. Or we just make a call for consensus now, decide everything, and we are done. Okay, Josh?
Yeah, so I want to take a step back to try and understand what kind of problems do we want to solve, or we're choosing not to solve with this proposal, right? So one of the complaints, right, is that if you try and use an or within the alert itself, the labels need to match, right? That part, from what I'm hearing, right, we're choosing to deliberately not solve. So you still need, even if we go with multiple expressions, which we already have consensus on, we agree that the multiple expressions need to label match.
I don't think, yeah, but I don't think that it is an issue. Why do you say that people don't want that?
So, like, to me, that's an issue in terms of usability, right? So I want to divide the 4 problems, right? So that's one, label matching on an or, right? The other one is, one of the reasons why we want to introduce this is because when people want holding the alert it's different from resolving, right? Or the same concept applies for triggering as well, because we now have keep firing forward to a certain extent. Correct or not correct? Just a problem.
I'm not sure. I'm not understand the term holding the alert.
So being able to say that the alert is firing, despite the condition that trigger it, it's still firing. So it still has something to say. You know, despite the condition of triggering, it's resolve anymore. The other way around.
Can you restart the sentence from the beginning, please?
When the alert fires, and the condition that fired the alert to begin with resolves, you want the alert to continue firing until something else happens.
Personally, I want to be able to choose.
To be able to choose.
Because I think both of them are valid.
I think, I mean, the whole argument about how hysteresis is done in other systems, I think hysteresis is always bound to one dimension. It's never the case that what we, like just before the break, discussed, that you must specify if the start condition is still valid when the stop condition fires, because they're always along the same dimension. You will never have that problem. When the stop condition is true, the start condition is not true anymore. That's like whatever, when frantically searching Wikipedia, that's all the hysteresis I could find. It's a different thing, and we can do this, of course, in Prometheus when we say we want to start triggering when the temperature is above 20 degrees, and then we want to only stop firing when the humidity is below 50% or something, like connecting two completely different things. And then we get into this discussion if the start condition is still valid or not. But I don't even think that's, I mean, I would like a use case to be demonstrated, because that's not a hysteresis. A hysteresis is always along one dimension.
Okay, sorry, that was not clear to me. Cool.
I mean, having said that, when we allow any PromQL expression, of course, you could formulate something like that, but I don't think we need to put all the plumbing in space to now have like and alls between those conditions. That's like coming back to my original proposal. I think we can model a hysteresis plus a few other cases with this whole thing. We have a set of expressions. If they're all true, we start to fire. When they're all false, we stop firing, period, right? I think modulo problems with the templating and alerting API, but I think conceptually this is very clean and elegant. And even if it doesn't have an explicit resolve, whatever condition, start and stop condition, but an inverted stop condition if you want, it's just, it's such a small change, and it's semantically so overly clear.
Yes, I agree.
So what are you going to do with the alert? You're going to fail it at query time. So let's say that you put two series that don't match in the expression.
It is just two different alerts, and if the label set does not match, it is just two different outputs.
I mean,
Just like now, you can have two rooms with two labels for the room name, and one of them is at 20, the other one is at 25.
That's not what I'm hearing, Julian. Sorry. Go ahead.
You can't. If they're tied into one single thing, however we define the thing, I don't think you can emit completely independent alerts from the thing.
Yeah, I would say the alert only materializes when all expressions give at least one vector element that has the same labels.
Yes.
That's the idea. But
Yes.
this is in the hysteresis classical case, because it's only among one dimension. It will always happen. You write something like this full % greater than X. And that's the same in the other one, just has a different X. Like this super simple case where I just have different thresholds, that's still simple. It doesn't get more complicated by that. You just open up the possibility that you can do some fancy things if you really want to. But if you don't do fancy things, it's also not getting into your way.
But I'm not arguing for doing or not doing, right? What I want to make sure is I understand what kind of problems we're solving with this, right? And I was really confused by that part, because I thought, as Julian just did, right, that we would allow multiple dimensions, and that was the feature. But what you're saying here, no, we're not going to allow that. So in turn, this is just syntactic sugar, because if we have a strict requirement that labels must match, then this is something that you can express with one PromQL query to a certain extent. No, I'm just confused.
Yeah, you can express that in one PromQL query if you query the alerts.
If you query the alert series, yeah, I agree. But it's one PromQL query nonetheless, right? Yeah, I agree.
You could do that with one PromQL query.
That's important. The word "could" here, it's important, right? Because that means that this is just syntactic sugar at the end of the day, right? Whereas I was thinking that this would allow you to query multiple metrics and get all the dimensions of those metrics to begin with, which is like a really powerful thing. I wholeheartedly agree with that one. But now that you need the label series to match, I see this as a footcon, because the only way for you to fail this alert rule is when the alert rules is running, right? So you don't get any immediate feedback directly when you put the alert. You now need to wheel the alert to execute in order to get the data back, right? And sometimes, in the case of sending duplicate data or someone messing up their script on the series, as I've seen right now, right, the alert could randomly fail.
Isn't that true for all alerts?
I mean,
This is
go ahead. Yes, right.
this is what we are doing now. Yes.
To a certain extent, yes, but it's more prone if you have more queries in there. It just exacerbates the problem, which is like a real problem. Because like there's no historical store of failure. So you have an alert that failed at some point. If you query the alert series, you don't see a gap for that alert. You don't see a failure. So you don't know it failed unless you have an alert on the alert evaluation itself. And then check the logs to see what happened.
I don't get it.
You're raising a good
Yeah.
point.
You lost me.
Maybe I think I'm starting to understand where you're going. Distinct from most of what you said, maybe it would make sense to have more than one time series, which is generated by this mechanism. One for the thing would be firing, and one for the thing is actively being suppressed by hysteresis.
Say that again. Say that again, Richie. Sorry.
Sorry, what?
Say that again. Sorry.
My point was that maybe it would make sense to emit two artificial series as part of the recording rule. I mean, alert rule. That was just to annoy Julius. To one where this thing should currently be firing, and another one for this thing is currently being hysteresis.
Maybe but
Of
that's
state.
implementation detail. That's not what I'm talking about. Because that falls into the whole separate category that I just pasted in the chat, which is debugging the alert rule, right? But the argument that I'm trying to make is if you introduce this change, right, whenever there's a potential harm to the user, right, and to me, that's the only thing that I disagree with, right? Because my initial thought was that you weren't required to do label matching, which introduces an entirely failure mode if now you're required to do. Which I'm not sure I agree with, and that's the argument that I was making. That's the point that I was making. Originally, we agreed multiple expressions, but multiple expressions is irrelevant as an agreement unless we specify whenever you need to do label matching or not. That's the argument.
I think you lost half of the room just looking at the faces of the people. Are you willing to write this down?
Yeah, let me tell you.
My thinking is this: we have half an hour left, and we spent. I mean, I really enjoyed this discussion, but we spent much more time on this than I remotely anticipated. It might mean that this is a good topic for in person during KubeCon Amsterdam. Or it might mean it's not a good one if not everyone who cares about this is going to be at KubeCon. But
I think we should collect more use cases to see exactly what we want to implement.
That always makes sense. But also just now that we put off the table a textual expression language, we could actually come up with a concrete suggestion how to, like, different ways of doing this, right? And then we can concretely compare those proposals next to each other, and because we start to argue like what would be more intuitive and stuff like that, and that's better to judge if we have a concrete proposal on the table.
sounds good. So should we stop here and not call for more consensus and just collect thoughts and syntax proposals and such? I had one thing where I thought we should be doing one, but I honestly forgot. So it probably wasn't too important.
It sounded like one consensus was that inventing a new alert resolve QL is not wanted.
Yeah, but we
Yeah,
have
that's-
if a hysteresis mechanism is chosen, it will be based on PromQL.
We wanted to have it in a positive way.
Yeah, of course, in theory, you could probably come up with something which doesn't fall under the negative statement, but would still not be the positive intention of staying close to PromQL. Okay, but then let's actually stop here and collect stuff, and maybe we'll I'll make a note that maybe we'll talk about it again next time. We'll see. So let me see. I just need to check because people left and rejoined and everything. So let's see who's here. Is Simon still? Yes, he is. Ben, switch logging to slog. Ben back? I think he's back. He joined, but no, there he is. Ben, are you here? Björn, Bartek, Simon, do you want to take this topic and just talk through it?
I can take the topic. So we have been using GoLogKit for quite a long time now, but now there is something which is closer to the standard library. It is in the Go X libraries, it is log, and it enables more like native structured logging, and Ben wants to switch away from the GoKit log to slog. It has a huge impact because all the exporters, anyone using the Prometheus libraries would need to also do this, but I think it's something that we could do, and we could even maybe have a small helper to help people migrate.
Yeah, it's really kind of like a question, is this gonna be adopted, right? So we don't know how much people will like it, how much issues they might have, right? But it looks really similar to Go Gitlog. The only thing I would add is to make sure we always use interface. There is no interface in slog, so it's like a structure that you can just use, whatever, but it's up to users to, for example, like us, like library, to create an interface that accepts the structure, not to force everyone to use the structure. That was the major pain in normal standard logger. That's what Go Git Logger has by default. So I just want to make sure we have that in place, because then anybody can use whatever adapters, right? So yeah, I think we should try it, but it might be bumpy.
So do you mean that we should implement slog, use the Go Git interface and implement slog in the back?
No, I would switch everything, like remove GoKit in, GoKit, anything GoKit related. So remove this dependency at all. However, allow others to use any other adapters, right? So like anybody using Prometheus doesn't need to have GoKit, or sorry, slog. It can use whatever they have, right? Which already GoKit enabled because we use interface everywhere, right?
Okay, makes sense.
The other point that might be interesting to look into is the integration with Kubernetes logging. We have this small adapter that would wrap JLog into GoKit log. You probably want to keep it. I haven't looked into the detail of slog. I would imagine that it's possible to do the same. If not even natively, I don't know. Maybe client Go would switch to it. That should be on the things to check, I guess.
Yeah, if they support it natively, it is super great, because then you can get Prometheus with Go installed, because that replace option in the Go.mod is a big pain.
Yeah.
Do you know, Julian, how it works with the path? Like right now, slog is an experimental path. And I believe in 1.21, it will be in a different path, right? So is that the problem?
That should be a really easy thing to switch to. We don't actually need to switch to it. I was just linking that the experimental one so that people could look at the docs. I looked over the docs. We've been just talking about this for our standard library at work, and we're already like, yeah, we're just going to switch to this. I think we're using Zap right now, and pretty much everything is like, it looks like a really, really nice library. It fixes all the bugs about GoKit log that I didn't like. And yeah, it just looks like it has a nice way of using it. And I haven't looked at it specifically about the interface thing you're talking about, but it does have like adapters and things that people can use different logging libraries. But it's going to be in the standard lib soon, so I don't see any major road bumps here.
And do you know if the JSON that will be generated will be the same as the current one?
The JSON output? I have not looked at the JSON output to see how compatible it is.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, right? Like that's I bet you can kind of plug in this, but that might be breaking changes or something if someone parses Prometheus logs, right?
There is a question from Brian. Can you clarify whether Prometheus changing logger will force downstream to adopt Go 121? No, they will just need to import that it's just a library for now that you can get even in Go 19.
Yeah, in the same situation as you remember with context, where we have this weird path for context, and then they replace it to standard context, right?
And even Prometheus, we always test not only with the latest release, but with the previous one to make sure that we don't then force downstream to upgrade to the latest version. So. Okay, I think we can do the call for consensus.
Apply for one. Consensus. We will experiment with switching over. All agreed? Anyone disagreeing? Bam. Next one.
I'm Richie.
Yes.
I'm wondering. So we need to choose one with 3 votes now, right?
Yes.
Can we just have a quick vote on how to call the not native histograms? Because I think it will be very quick and I want to finish the data model. So if we can just find a name that I can use in 2 minutes. I don't even have a strong opinion. I just want consensus how we call it.
Let's see if we find consensus, but I also honestly don't care. Okay, so who has a strong opinion? What does OpenTelemetry call it again?
I think fixed buckets histogram. And the other one, binary exponential bucket histogram or so.
You think or you know? And by extension, is it worth being certain?
Wait a second, I can look it up.
Because that's the only one mild opinion I personally have, that if we get the same name across the industry, it would be nice. Beyond this, Björn probably has the strongest opinion, and maybe Ganesh.
I mean, the problem is that OTel calls it exponential histogram because that's the first time they use exponential buckets, and that doesn't apply to us because we had exponential buckets always. This is why I came up with native histograms, because it's not focusing on a single feature, which will always be incomplete, but it's essentially focusing on the root. Like, what did we change? We made histograms first-class citizens, which, of course, for OpenTelemetry, maybe they always had histograms as first-class citizens. I don't know. They just had fixed buckets, but nobody has implemented anything in OpenTelemetry, right? I mean, it's a standard that you can map implementation into. I don't know. I mean, Fabian was also up for like having a pair, right? Like static dynamic or something. And then the pair would be native and emulated, right? Yeah, the problem with static and dynamic is it's again only one feature, right? It's
Manual
not
and dynamic.
And I wouldn't say it's like the main feature. I think the even more main feature is that it's actually encoded as a sample in the TSDB.
So I did write an article for the Linux magazine, and I called the old one the classic histogram and the new one the native histogram.
Yeah. I mean, classic makes sense because, but it's again, it's a very Prometheus-centric naming, but I don't think that we will find, because they are just like OpenTelemetry is just coming from a completely different angle than Prometheus. So I don't think what we had before in Prometheus is comparable to the OpenTelemetry histograms that are not exponential histograms, and it doesn't even map, right? We kind of come from two different universes, and then by accident, or of course not by accident, by hard work, the new thing we came up with on both ends happen to be compatible mostly. But it's not that the opposite of what we came together now at is the same. It's just a very different thing, like classical Prometheus histograms versus whatever OpenTelemetry used for histograms. I mean, I like classic, and if it has to be like a semantic pair, it has to be emulated, but that's perhaps a bit too long.
Nobody likes legacy?
Legacy,
game
Legacy has automatic value judgment in it. Please don't.
Yeah, that's why I was going for it. So like to encourage people to switch. But I guess then if we had ever add like a third type of histogram, that makes it even more confusing.
You can call it smelly, weird poo-poo histograms, but
I mean, the argument for the third one also goes with the classic, because classic, and then what do you call the one intermediate there?
Yeah, exactly. Classic points to kind of an era of time more than any other feature of this thing. Legacy as well, but it has more of a value judge. I guess like emulated is the most descriptive one, but it sounds kind of long and not so nice.
So counterintuitive. I mean, who here is emulated and thinks, oh, that means I need to configure the buckets.
manual.
Manual histogram. Yeah, but that doesn't capture the biggest aspect, that it is stored in one sample versus not.
It's
Yeah,
the
you could
biggest
argue-
impact in terms of what the time
that does
series
not
database
matter.
does. But
Sorry.
it's the biggest impact in terms of what the TSDB does internally. But the biggest impact from the user's perspective is whether you configure buckets or not.
Precisely.
Because
Yeah.
the user so far had to deal with a gazillion of series that happen to be buckets, right? We didn't have histograms arguably before. We had one function that had some special thing, which was also very elegant, but yeah.
Yeah,
Which is a very good argument in favor
they
of.
can get better resolution at much lower cost.
But isn't the fact that you had to do more work and arguably it wasn't real histograms a good argument in favor of this being manual work? I mean, again, I don't have a strong opinion on the actual name. I just want to find something which is.
Yeah, I don't think it's
Really
much
move on.
about the manualness. It's just like the trade-off between cost and precision was way harder with the older ones.
Yeah, I would be
But I'm
against
with
manual.
Fabian.
I would be
from
against
the-
manual because it's like it's conflicting with this auto instrumentation and manual instrumentation. Fixed. I vote for fixed or static, honestly. Maybe you should vote, essentially, have some survey.
I mean, at the point where we are voting, we can also open this to the Prometheus developers mailing list, because I don't think this is something which we as in Prometheus team should be having a formal vote on. This is something where the community should be able to pick something, and ideally quickly enough for Fabian to be able to use the name.
So
I'm
create
slightly
all?
worried about that approach, like, because I think people need to understand enough of the context of both to vote, and I'm just slightly worried that people click on something, like if we do a poll, and they haven't really fully considered what the meaning behind both of them is. Like, what is the most important aspect of the old ones for naming them, for example, in contrast to the new ones? Like, will everyone have that in their heads?
A, you might be overthinking this. B, perfect is the enemy of the good. And C, we may be falling into the expert's curse, because, again, I strongly agree with Fabian that the naming should be from the perspective of the user, not from someone who is deep in TSDB and such. Because that perspective arguably does not really matter, because we
I
can
think
use
then classic or legacy is the best, just going for not a feature, but just kind of an era kind of thing.
that has the problem with if we have 3 versions, but we can also just
does.
call them version 1.
Yeah, or that, yeah. Because I think if we're not going, like, if we're going for a descriptive thing, and we're not going to pick the aspect that is the most important as the descriptive word, then it's kind of not that great, I think.
But the most important aspect depends on the perspective, and
Yeah.
there are many different perspectives. We cannot even say the non-experts have all the same perspective.
Yep.
There are non-experts with different perspectives.
So, but I think that makes it even harder to pick one of those terms. So I'm much more for like either classic or legacy.
Even fixed histogram will become so annoying once we launch the feature of fixed buckets in native histograms.
Yeah,
which is
exactly.
a client feature, right?
They don't prevent fixed buckets either. Exactly.
So what about version 1? Histograms version 1, version 1 histograms.
Which version 1? Was that the histogram that only existed in Prometheus version 1, and Prometheus version 2 had native histograms? User perspective.
Yeah, I don't think it's worth versioning, really.
I mean, I like a word like classical legacy is rolls off the tongue, and it makes it immediately clear to everyone what we mean. And the histogram is a bit of a problem because this has a mathematical meaning, right?
How about classic Prometheus histograms as the full name? And we can just call them classic, but as the official name, we call them classic Prometheus histograms. No, let's forget I even asked this. Does anyone have anything against classic? Okay. Does anyone feel strongly enough to run this test for any of the other names?
I mean, the name will be found anywhere, but we can now all agree to try to call it classic histograms, and then we can see if it sticks.
No, I mean, Fabian is right, and if he needs this for actual work.
I mean, the thing is, if I hope client libraries implement it, and if every client libraries uses different names, that would be annoying.
Yeah. So but then they are all free developers. Right?
Okay, compatibility is histogram for us. Just saying.
let's promote classic histogram because I think it's better than conventional histogram, which is what we often use, but it has the potential of misunderstandings.
We call it
And it's
classic,
short.
and then the new ones can be called modern, and then if we have a third version, it's postmodern.
I think the new. Let's not. Okay, consensus. We will promote the name Classic Histogram. All agreed? Anyone disagreeing? Good. We have 8 minutes left. Should we try and shove another topic in, or should we end 8 minutes early? Ben wants to leave. Julian wants to continue. Who else?
We need an 8-minute topic for that to fill that gap.
How should we call the new history? Let's discuss hysteresis. No.
The new ones are called native, right?
They're still called
Okay,
native. Not modern.
Yes.
We have modern histograms then atomic histograms, information ages. It's like in CIF.
Julian internationalization. Maybe that's a quick one, or maybe it's not. I don't think we have much else which might be quick.
No, so I think we can stop at this point.
So what?
I think we can stop here.
Okay. So you mean you don't want the topic to be discussed, or you mean you want
No.
to end 7 minutes early?
I don't think that internationalization can be done in 8 minutes.
Okay. Okay. Images and notification and alert manager, if Josh wants to have a go, at least make the case, we think about it, and we will not come to a conclusion. You're muted.
That was important if I want to talk. Which one?
Images in alert manager notifications.
No, it's very minor. We can talk about it in person. It's fine. I'm fine with it. Yeah.
But Richie, maybe you want to use this room to announce the Dev Summit at KubeCon and invite the people not in team that are in this room.
That is a very good point. I mean, you just did, but yes, let's do it formally. We will be meeting Bartek at Google, correct? Yes. Do you know offhand when and where, and can you put this in here? And anyone who is in this call is heartily invited if you are in Amsterdam on Monday. And anyone who's watching this on YouTube is also heartily invited. Please poke Bartek or I or someone, Prometheus team at groups.google.com. Yeah, anyone who sees this is invited. It's the Monday before KubeCon, or it's the Monday before the pre-event before KubeCon, which is April the 17th. And it's starting at 11 o'clock and it goes until 1800. And we will be in the Google office, Claude de Belusien 38. In the room NLAMS CLA 15 Johan Krulef Tech Talk, 50 people capacity. I'm also going to put this into chat if you want to copy this.
Now that there's limited people, right? And 50 is when we do meetup. 25 is when we do like break rooms. So there might be first come, first serve. We already have 11 people, so there's still room for more.
So anyone who wants to come, either raise your voice now, so we put you on the list, which we are apparently about to make, or email Prometheus team at groups.google.com.
Yeah. What about the recordings or kind of like virtual? Do we do virtual as well? We could, yeah.
If the room supports it, sure.
Best effort.
Yeah, reasonable effort. Okay, so again, anyone who is currently in this call, do you want to join? Can you join? Are you physically in except for Prometheus team, that's kind of cheating.
Yeah, for Prometheus team, please accept the calendar. And then for anyone else, I will add you to calendar.
So going once, going twice, going 10th. Anyone in Amsterdam and want to come? If you change your mind, or if you can make it after all, again, email Prometheus team or Bartek or any of us. Prometheus team is best, then we can't overlook it. Okay, then let's stop 4 minutes early. See you soon.